What, would you like to do it? You would like to do it?
Yeah?
Accelerate this process. Okay, so everyone gets a heart.
Maybe you could take one and pass it along.
Is my microphone working?
This is a Zen thing. You know, actually, Dalai Lama does it also. Every time you ever do anything, you get someone to, he gets people to chant the Heart Sutra in all different languages whenever he does any kind of teaching or meeting. It's like in the whole Buddhist world, except not that I did it in Sri Lanka actually, but it's not their thing, you know.
There are even Hindus who do Heart Sutra.
Really? True. That's true. Well, I'm kind of a Hindu myself.
I know.
Since Hindu means anybody who does anything spiritual in India.
Hindu means Sindhu, which is anything over the Sindhu River.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's right.
So that includes Buddhists.
Exactly. I consider Judaism came from there personally, instead of this Ur crap. And that's the Garden of Eden. Indus, you know. Hindu, like Eden, they just mispronounced it. And it was the garden in those ancient days, Harappa. You know?
Yeah.
It was. Okay, and, let's go ahead and do this. I need something to make a clang noise, but I never mind. I'll just do it like this. Okay, we do this in the Zen manner, those of you who are not used to it. And that means you sort of do every syllable. And this is in order to get over one's conceptualization, worrying about words and what they mean. And you just do syllable by syllable. It's like, in that sense, mantra, okay? And it's Transcendent Wisdom Sutra, okay? Okay? In Sanskrit, go ahead, we go together. In Sanskrit, Bhagavati Prajnaparamita Vedaya Sutra. In Tibetan, Jomdanyaya Shara Bhajandi Yodo. In English, Blessed Lady Buddha, Transcendent Wisdom Heart Sutra. Thus did I hear on a singular occasion, the Blessed Lord was dwelling on the vulture peak at Raja, together with great communities of mendicants and bodhisattvas. At that time the Blessed Lord entranced himself in the teaching samadhi called illumination of the profound just and the noble bodhisattva. Avalokiteshvara, the great hero, was realizing the profound transcendence of wisdom, and he realized that his five body-mind processes are void of any intrinsic reality. Thereupon, moved by the Buddha's power, Venerable Shariputra addressed the noble bodhisattva. Avalokiteshvara, the great hero, thus when a noble son wants to engage in learning the profound transcendence of wisdom, how should he practice? Then the noble bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, the great hero, addressed Venerable Shariputra, the Shariputra. When any noble son or noble daughter wishes to engage in the practice of the profound transcendence of wisdom, he or she should realize it in this way. These five body-mind processes should be truly realized, to be void of any intrinsic reality. Matter is voidness, voidness is matter, voidness is not other than matter. Neither is matter other than voidness. Likewise, sensations, conceptions, mental functions, and consciousnesses are also void. Shariputra, thus all things are voidness, timeless, uncreated, unsustainless, impeccable, undecreased, and unincreased. Shariputra, thus in voidness there are no matter, no sensation, no conception, no function, no consciousness, senses, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mentality, no verb, no sound, no sense, no taste, no texture, no idea. There are no sense media from eye to mentality, sense medium, and there are no consciousness media from the visual through the mental consciousness medium. Either there are no ignorance and no cessation of ignorance, and so on up to no old age and death, and no cessation of old age and death either. Likewise, there are no suffering, no origination, no cessation, no path, no intuitive wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment either. Therefore, Shariputra, because the Bodhisattva is without missing, she lives in reliance on transcendent wisdom. His spirit is unobscured and free of fear, passing far beyond all confusion. She ultimately succeeds in nirvana. And all the Buddhas who live in past, present, and future rely on transcendent wisdom to reach manifestly perfect Buddhahood in unexcelled perfect enlightenment of being. So that is the mantra of transcendent wisdom, the mantra of great science, the unexcelled mantra, the uniquely universal mantra, the mantra that ends all suffering. It is not false and to be known as truth, the transcendent wisdom mantra as follows: Tadyata Om Gate Gate Para Gate Para Samgate Bodhi Swaha Om Gate Gate Para Gate Para Samgate Bodhi Swaha Om Gate Gate Para Gate Para Samgate Bodhi Swaha. Shariputra, the Shuddha Bodhisattva, the great hero, learned the profound transcendence of wisdom. Thereupon the blessed Lord arose from that samadhi and applauded the noble Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, the great hero, excellent, excellent, noble son. So it is, one should practice the profound transcendence of wisdom in just the way you have taught it. And the transcendent Buddhas will joyfully congratulate you when the blessed Lord has spoken thus. The venerable Sharadati Putra, the noble Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, the great hero, and everyone in that audience and the whole world, gods, humans, titans, and fairies rejoiced and all applauded what the Buddha said. Oh, any negative spirit that may be lurking around, be gone, be gone, be gone. Okay. Try to keep it without scrunching it up if you can possibly. If you have a little notebook or something. Try to keep it. Because we'll use it again and again. So, what do you say? Did they not distribute your chantings too? Ganesha one?
Oh, they could
There.
distribute them.
Where is it?
They're over there.
They're on the chair,
What's that?
if we want them.
Do you want to do that, or what do you want to do?
Oh, we
So you want to say
could
that for the
distribute them,
What?
as long as they bring them back in the morning.
What's that?
Yeah, if you take one, please bring it with you to the session after,
After breakfast session.
so you don't have to read them while you practice asana.
We should give you a little folder to put it in.
Yeah.
In the future, we should get some Menla folders.
And a little backpack.
What?
A little Menla
Yeah,
backpack.
or at least I like one of those things, one of the little things.
Yeah.
We should do that. People don't put it on the floor and stuff, it's too bad omen. The Heart Sutra is, transcendent wisdom means the realization of wisdom means intelligence, actually. Prajna, sort of super intelligence. It doesn't just mean sort of resignation or something like that. And paramita, that has gone beyond transcendent. And that's when you realize the Nairatmya Parama Atma, the supreme self of selflessness. And that's the object of, if you will, of transcendent wisdom. Although transcendent wisdom merges with its object, so it's a non-dual wisdom where you become the supreme self of selflessness. And it's considered a female Buddha because female Buddhas are smarter than male Buddhas. Somehow, just like people. Although, actually, all Buddhas are both male and female, like people really are, if they do. And they have both sides every being does. And so, in another day, I will give commentary on that, but not tonight. But just to mention that what we chanted, what is the Heart Sutra? And the heart means there are 18 different transcendent wisdom sutras, 100,000 verses or lines, and then one syllable. The shortest one is one syllable, the longest one is 100,000 verses or lines. And this one is just a manageable one page in English. And so it's considered like the heart of the whole thing. Right? Hridaya, literally. Same word, like hrid, like heart. Hridaya. Dr. Freeman, I'm so happy to have you here.
Oh, it's
What
nice to be
would
here.
you like to tell us?
Well, we have come for a discussion.
For what?
A discussion.
Yes,
A dialectic.
yes, good.
Uh,
That's what I like.
We're looking at the Bhagavad Gita, which is probably, it's a very important book.
Absolutely. It's like the big scripture of it. It's the New Testament of Hinduism.
Yeah, it's the Quran.
Right.
But it's a problematic book. It's always
Yeah.
driven me crazy.
Makes two of us.
Yeah, and there are certain verses, that I love. But a lot of it is like, wait a minute, but when you actually look at it, that's what Arjuna is doing. He's going, wait a minute, this is something is screwed here.
Mm-hmm.
And so he refuses to just, do the submission thing. Because he's a very intelligent and interesting person. And so the
might
book,
even come from Colorado.
Arjuna, Colorado.
Just kidding.
And so and a lot of people, they a lot of the commentaries on it smear over the difficulties of the text.
Mm-hmm.
But I think but if you look at it's part of a very large work called the Mahabharata, which has a lot of crazy sections that are very clever, and a lot of it is the poet who composed it, Vyas, maybe it was one poet, or maybe it was a number of Vyasas who kept reincarnating. That nobody knows. But it has a great sense of humor, and Vyas overall loves to poke fun at religious things. People who take things literally, or who are orthodox, and he also pokes fun at people who take opposite views of that, who are, whatever it is, he pokes fun and has a good time. And so the Gita is, I think, no exception to that. And so I like to look at and it begins, where Arjuna asks Krishna, who's his charioteer,
Right.
his own intelligence, basically, to draw his chariot up between the two armies. Ubayor, Senayor, Madhye.
Right.
And so, you'll see a lot of Indian art, where chariots between two armies. But these armies are vast, according to this incredible story of the Mahabharata. And the whole book, to me, has this flavor of not allowing any one tradition or definition of any of the important metaphysical words stay. It allows you to get stuck on what you think the meaning of Atman is, or Paramatman, or Brahman, or Shunyata, because it's always it introduces this, and basically Krishna, who is of course everyone, or not everyone, but Many people are just bowing down. He keeps, throughout the book, systematically coming down off his pedestal that is actually placed, our minds place whatever we think truth is,
Right.
up on a pedestal so that our ego can have a, just as good a pedestal to survive with. And Krishna, who is just this interesting character, keeps coming down and says, oh, by the way, here I am over here too. And kind of deconstructing and teaching, what is understood to be bhakti. But then again, even bhakti is taken apart in the later parts of the, anybody who's doing anything.
How is that taken apart?
Well, if you do anything, so if you just simply, I am a bhakta, the fact that you said I, is then interpreted as, oh, there's the ego trying to co-opt bhakti. And that's not bhakti.
I see.
And he keeps redefining it pretty much in the what I found to be in the conception of a bodhisattva. Where Krishna is claiming that he is beloved in the hearts of all beings, but not Krishna as an idol, but Krishna as that very beloved in all beings.
The love in all beings.
Yeah, and that you have to serve, if you really want to awake other beings, that's the best thing is to help. And then he says, I keep, I don't need anything because it's Krishna. Remember, it's a myth. But he says, I'm always coming back all the time because people are always forgetting the Dharma. And a fascinating use in the book is also the word of Buddha, the awakened ones.
Oh, they use Buddha for Krishna?
Oh, yeah. Well, Krishna says, like, very famous verse, Tesham evanukam buddham. Okay, because you have, as a Hindu, you have to memorize this. You don't even get to inquire until you've memorized it. I, out of compassion, dwelling within their hearts, destroy with the shining lamp of knowledge. I destroy ignorance with the shining lamp of knowledge. Let's see, how does that go?
So do you have the text there?
Yeah, but the entire internet is here. Anyway, so many times it says it's the awakened ones. Always translated as the awakened ones.
Yeah, good.
But he uses it hundreds of times.
Yes.
The term Buddha
About himself.
as the awakened ones, not about himself,
Oh.
but those who are awakened.
Oh, I see.
See me in the heart of all beings.
Yes, of course, it's just a title, it's a cognitive description.
Yeah.
Of
But
somebody.
what's interesting is most of the commentators who tend to want to defend Hinduism against the Buddhists.
I know,
who
the
move it into
the
their
horrible,
territory.
nihilistic Buddhists.
Yeah, then they don't believe in anything.
What?
They don't believe in anything.
That's what they think.
Yeah. And they never point out, oh, by the way, have you ever noticed that he's using the term Buddha, the awakened one?
Really?
All the time.
Really? They never mentioned that?
No, they just like, we're not going there. And they, and it's like a number of the pivotal texts within yoga schools
Yes.
are highly influenced by Buddhist tradition.
Oh, of course.
And of course, the poets are well trained, like Patanjali, Yoga Sutra. He was a Naga, and basically he encodes, so many Buddhist terms and teachings within the Yoga Sutra.
Yes.
And then people think, oh, the Yoga Sutra is Sankhya.
Yes.
And then, of course, Patanjali says, well, of course, but let's look at Sankhya.
Right.
And let's look more closely, and you go, aha. And he actually takes apart the whole dualism of Sankhya.
Right.
And it's quite clever. And to me, it's delightful to see, and it could be my imagination.
No, I think you're right. Actually, I strongly argue, and I got Dalai Lama to agree with me, after, a number of times of being able to really slug it out in what we call limo time. When he's not in his office, when we're riding somewhere. Those are the times we've had our best conversations in the last few decades. Because the secretary is always interrupting you when you're actually in the audience room or something, and there's another 20 people who have to come in, and they get very annoyed when he gets excited and wants to converse with you. So when we have limo time, then no one else can get in the car, so it's really great. And so he agreed that Buddhism basically is an education system. It's not really an ism, and therefore that's why it's perfectly happy with Krishna or anybody. It's pretty much okay. And in Buddha's time, the creator was not Vishnu, but it was considered Brahma, Brahma Shikin, they called him, the crown-crested Brahma.
Yeah.
He was considered creator in Buddha's time. And he, in the Buddha Sutra, he requests Buddha to tell people that he didn't really create everything, and he doesn't really control everything. And he doesn't mind them worshiping him when things are going well for them, thanking him and thinking he did it for them. But he doesn't like it when things go horrible for them. Then they blame him because they think he's omnipotent and he did this to me, you see. And he doesn't like that. So he deputizes Buddha, he requests him actually, rather not deputize, he requests him humbly to please tell beings that he's doing his best for them, and that he can. But he's not omnipotent, and he didn't create the situation. That it's a mutual thing. We're all co-creating the situation. And so sometimes we get into difficulties when we're ignorant. Yeah. And he's less ignorant than us. Actually, Brahma is pretty smart, actually.
Well,
What?
He's got those heads.
He's what?
He's got 4 heads.
Well, he sometimes does.
Or sometimes 8.
Well, he has only one. When he comes down to the heaven of 33, it's another sutra where Indra is trying to marshal the other gods of the 33 to come listen to Buddha, who's teaching his mother. And they don't want to go to class because they want to have a party, because they're always having parties in Olympus, in heaven, Sudarshana. So he says, if you guys don't go to the class, Brahma is coming down here in the form of Panchashika, who looks a little like Manjushri, I think, actually, with five tufted, hair knot. And he's going to whip you guys into shape. So then they go, okay, we'll go to class. So they go to the class. Otherwise, they would be partying. That's in the sutra, That's in a text, And so there he only has one face. So Brahma can appear in very many ways. But normally he's called the 4-faced one, right? Brahma is
2-faced, 4-faced.
Because those are the 4 immensities. Those 4 faces symbolize the 4 immensities. I don't call them immeasurables anymore. I call them immensities. Why call it immeasurable when it's an immensity? Immensity means immeasurable. And it's a familiar word, right? Don't you like it?
Yeah.
No, that's one face is immense love, one face is immense compassion, one face is immense joy, one face is immense impartiality.
It's almost like the word immeasurable and then immense. It's like infinity and endless. It's like the words just, one word will.
I know, but I really got, people are used to saying the 4 immeasurables.
Yeah.
And it sounds like somebody tried to measure it and they failed. Whereas immensity, it's an immensity. That kind of gives you the idea of it.
I like that.
The other thing I recently discovered is that all beings in the 17 heavens, and the subdivisions of the 4 immensities, leading to the Brahma at the top, the form realm, pure form. Why is it called brahmacharya? Why is it called pure form? Because everyone is ambi. They're not just everyone in that realm. All the deities in that realm are androgynous. They're ambidextrous. Genitalized. It's even cooler than trans. Both things going. So that's why they're not looking for a date.
Yeah, because it's all there.
It's all there.
Oh, man.
So I think that's very cool. So LGBTQA.
Ambidextrous.
Never mind. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I'm in a
Arjuna.
happy mood because I'm seeing you guys.
Yeah. So another cool thing in the Gita.
Yes, back to Gita.
Is the whole, get back to that one.
Oh, it's good.
is that the idea of karma, because everyone
Yes.
thinks, oh, my karma is so bad, you're going to
Yeah.
get some bad karma by doing that.
Yes.
But and this is also done in books like the Kathopanishad,
Mm-hmm.
parts of that people don't actually.
Yes.
Where the idea of karma is actually the principle of creativity rather than the principle of destiny. In other words, if you're really mindful, if you pay close attention to, even teeny things
Sure.
as they manifest, you'll start to see that teeny things, start to leave impressions and causes.
Yes.
And you can create
Yeah.
wonderful universes and situations. Once you discover that creative principle. So it's,
Create, incur, karma is same verb.
yeah, the same
Same verb.
So rather than being, and so that's another misconception that I think.
That karma is some fate.
Yeah,
you
that
mean?
it's fate,
Yes.
rather than it's your creative potential
Yes.
is what karma is. And so you can make, if you're patient, you might take a while.
Yes.
If you can make some interesting,
I think so.
amazing.
Karma is okay. So then, the only, in the dialogue side of it, we're going to look at the Buddha Charita, which is an epic poem from the 3rd century, probably, Ashwagosha, right? We don't know, it could be a little earlier. Yeah, that's a funny thing, the Tibetans in their Kalachakra astronomy, they say Buddha lived in the 9th century, actually, not the 6th. And so, which I think is actually fairly logical, actually, that he might have been earlier. Nobody really knows, they just found inside Lumbini some other extra thing, like, the archaeology people did. They don't really know. And the Sri Lankans think he's only a couple hundred years before Ashoka. So that's why then people put it in the 6th century. But the Sri Lankans, what do they know? They're like way down there on the island. And the Tibetans from Kalachakra astronomy having to do with asterisms and different things, they put it in the 9th century, which then makes sense to me. But anyway, it's the thing about the war, telling Arjuna to fight. I first read the Gita in the 60s, of course, and then Vietnam War, And I didn't have to protest the war because I was 4F because I lost my eye. So I wasn't dodging draft, or I didn't have to do that. I might have been a conscientious objector, I think, because already by 61 I was a Buddhist. But I didn't have to do that. But I didn't like the idea of Krishna drafting, like LBJ, drafting Arjuna to fight some enemies. I really don't like that.
And that's one of the angles when we talk about it that we try to kind of shift that view of, because the actual story is, Krishna is saying to Arjuna, stand up and fight. And if you just look at that in those words, which most people, that's where you stop thinking about it, that sounds like stand up and kill people on both sides of this battle. And in fact, he comments and says, the next thing he starts talking about, Krishna starts talking about is, it doesn't matter that these people are going to die because we're all going to die, and we all just have these temporary bodies. But if you look at the text, what we've tried to do, and we're exploring it this year, is to look at it, like you were saying, as a teaching tool, as Krishna trying to teach Arjuna how to wake up, and teaching him some global ideas, like the idea of impermanence and interconnectedness and truth. If you look at him also teaching ideas like philosophical stances, like bhakti or jnana yoga or practices of yoga, and then you look at it on the layer of having a storyline, like the two of them, good friends, on the battlefield, and in various different levels of teaching, Krishna gives some big teaching about impermanence and then just kind of drops that teaching and then goes over to a specific about the storyline. and then drops that and goes over to a specific about a kind of philosophical stance that one might take. And so if you look at that as a teacher teaching a student how to start to question and wake up, then possibly you can look at him saying, stand up and fight as meaning something different from stand up and kill, but stand up and meet your circumstances. Take this depth of information from these three levels of your own story, the philosophical stances, and then global themes, and try to weave together something that makes sense.
Right.
And so that's an angle that can, if you look at it that way, it can shift your perspective. And that's, as we've been looking at the book for the last year, that's what's, as you start looking at it, it's like when you think about the way any of us learn something, that's how you learn, is you learn a little bit of kind of the practical stuff, and then you have some insight, and then you have some theory someone gives you, and then you drop it all, and then it becomes assimilated, and then you go to the next level. So that's one possible way of looking at these teachings.
Yeah, my idea is that Krishna is deliberately giving him an illogical conclusion. The fact that, he talks about, well, all of these, everyone here is going to die.
Right.
And, if you're smart, that doesn't bother you, because, a wise person realizes that. Therefore, stand up, there's no connection. Therefore, stand up and fight. There's no logical, you could say, therefore, don't fight.
Exactly.
Because that non-dual truth doesn't have a therefore after it. But Arjuna is smart, and the reader maybe is smart and says, wait a minute. And Arjuna, he says, wait a minute, so many times, until by the end he's saying, he wants him to stand up.
Yes.
But he also at one point stand up and do yoga, he said at one point in the book. And then by then he said, stand up and do what you want to do. How you're, according to your actual circumstances.
Yes.
That you have to do the best you can given. And it's no longer and the whole book has been teaching about how, the wise person isn't violent at all, how they cherish all beings, even, they're equal to their enemies, and they're like, and then, wait a minute. And
I know, that's the saddest thing.
And it's supposed, and I think it's a very deliberate creation on the part of the poet, too.
But then people
But of course, what
misinterpret
people
it immediately.
What?
But then people interpret it
Unfortunately,
immediately
yes.
as stand up
So
and
this
kill.
has to do with then how does one look at scripture? In other words, the principle of interpretation of what counts as scripture in Buddhism, which are the Buddha's discourses. He himself says you cannot decide things just because it said so in a scripture. You have to use your reason. And because there will be inconsistent things, because a great teacher, as you say, always teaches in a certain context to someone about a certain thing. Like, for example, Buddha doesn't always say selflessness. Sometimes he says self, you have to control yourself, you have to do this and that about the self. He uses that. And then people who analyze the Buddha's statement, like Nagarjuna, they say, sometimes Buddha says self, sometimes they say no self, sometimes they say both, sometimes they say neither, sometimes they maintain silence. In other words, the ones who analyze that will say that. And so what that means is that if you have that attitude, that you realize you're responsible for your interpretation, in the sense that you can't take something as a dogma. Nothing is a dogma. In other words, even what I say, Buddha said, even what I say is not a dogma. Dogmas can't be based in a scriptural statement. So the problem then, if you could approach the Gita that way, you could say, well, there he's saying something that has been consistently throughout Indian history badly misinterpreted. Gandhi interpreted it as an internal battle leading to ahimsa, to fit with his idea of nonviolence. And Gandhi was assassinated by the majority of the Hindus who don't interpret it that way. Shivaji, the one in Maharashtra, and Bose in Calcutta, they wanted to fight the British violently. And they interpreted that as a mandate to do that, right? And so, and the RSS interprets that as a mandate to eradicate the Muslims. And obviously, if you approach Scripture in like a Southern Baptist manner, to approach the Gita that way, where you can't look critically and say, well, that might be, in a certain context, maybe he said that to that guy just to get. Actually, the one thing that made me a little relent about my harshness of my critique of that draft bureau teaching, the draft bureau, well, you got to fight because you're a warrior, is that I noticed in the verses that you said when you sent me the big thing. You're doing a whole book on the Gita, by the way, right? Yeah. You have that 200 and some. I thought we were going to all study that 225 pages at first. I was like, oh wow. Anyway, it's great. But it mentioned how he was feeling like frightened. He was feeling uncomfortable. He was not being brave. In other words, they were emphasizing that. So yes, see, he should be brave, because you have to be even more brave to be nonviolent than you do to be violent. Yeah. So at least he's starting him up to be brave. So that could be a rationalization of that. Otherwise, stupid teaching to go kill people. Yeah. You know, if you know the story did you know the story of the Mahabharata? Probably a lot of you do. Do you know the story? They're just having this terrible war that starts the whole dark age on earth, because the stupid older brother of Arjuna gambled his wife in playing dice with a crooked guy who was gambling.
Who was their nephew?
Yeah, they were related. It was like brat cousins. They were a bunch of brat cousin princes bratting away and gambling. And then the 5 brothers had one wife. Either you could call her lucky girl or poor girl, depending on your point of view. And then the older brother, what?
She had 5 husbands.
Exactly, you could put it that way. It was polyandry. And the older brother staked her because he kept losing his stake in gambling. And then the nasty cousin would dishonored her and was rude to her and disgraced her, kind of. Once he owned her, he won her in the crooked gambling. And that's really the whole reason. And for that, they killed thousands of people. It's completely stupid. You know, it's like a cage match.
And the poet who's
the composer thinks it's like I wanted to see W have a cage match with Saddam Hussein if he didn't like his mustache, and SmackDown. That's it. And then, you know, we can Wrestling Federation, that's it. And then we don't have all these other people, hundreds of thousands of them killed. It's completely stupid. I don't like it. And I won't like it thousands of years ago, and I will never like it. And Buddha didn't like it. Yeah. Of course, the awkward thing about the Buddhist thing, which is why Sri Aurobindo was so annoyed with the Buddhists. Yes, dear. She's yawning already. Yes. Okay, what is it? This is my charioteer here. I like to talk, you know, did you ever see the Never-Ending Story? Yeah. She looks like that. She just has a long tail. She looks a little bit. My son calls them long goldfish. He's much cleverer than me. Anyway, so that's the thing that he was being cowardly, that's bad, because you have to be more. Oh yeah, Aurobindo didn't like him because if you really get into ahimsa, then you're willing to die rather than to kill. And then, unfortunately, in history up till recent times, people are willing to oblige you, and they're ready to come kill you. Yeah. And India was conquered first by a bunch of Turks and Persians and Muslim Arabs, and then by a bunch of weirdos from Europe. And finally the Brits, stiff upper lip, they showed up. And that's so Aurobindo was mad, he blamed it on the Buddhists, And the Tibetans also got killed. And Shakyamuni's own Shakya kingdom was trashed in his lifetime, because all the young princes of the Shakyas, when they went to one session at Menla with Richard Freeman's previous life, Shariputra or something, and they decided they were going to do some yoga instead of going out and fighting, and they decided they didn't want to pay tuition, so they didn't need to have a bunch of kids, and they decided they didn't want to have to give a bunch of childbirths for the women, and they all went off to become mendicants, and then everybody gave them free food, and then they all left, and there was no one defending the country. You know? So the Shakya kingdom was wasted during Buddha's lifetime. So Buddhism disarms everybody, because you become vulnerable. You choose that, right? And that takes more courage than fighting people, because you're facing death, and you embrace it even rather than kill anybody else, right?
Right, but then there are these dilemmas.
Well, there's a little bit of a dilemma, but it's massively only exceptional.
All right, exceptional.
Super exceptional. You never draft an army,
No.
because once you draft an army, you have an RSS in the army. Bunch of weird slugs, and they shoot everybody, you know, and they go crazy.
Yeah.
So it doesn't allow for holy war. You know, it's Buddhism. Buddha didn't, and India didn't. But now here's my question to everybody. This so far has therefore proved counterproductive to everyone. However, now, who is going to save this planet? They're going back, Mr. Trump and Mr. Putin and Mr. Xi they're making these supersonic missiles capable of nuclear warheads that cannot possibly be defended against. They go at low altitude at Mach 4 and Mach 5. And they're building them, they're all crazily building them. They're so happy, oh wow, we can do this. They go at Mach 5 at sea level. There's no defense at all. So then first strike, everyone has to be ready for first strike. And what would make them have first strike? You know, his hairdo would fall down, Mr. Yuckface. You know, and he might push one missile. You know, him and the two hairdos, the North Korean guy and the red one, the black one.
Yeah.
The tower and the fox, right? The fox and the groundhog. And it's just terrible. So in other words, in that sort of a world climate, which is the survival enhancing? To have a big army and all their weapons, or everyone willing to die rather than kill anybody else? That finally is the only safe thing in the longest run.
Yeah.
That's the only safe thing. You know, and that's why we have to admire the Tibetans actually. Nowadays, 162, I think, so far, they reached a point where they wanted to kill some Chinese. You know, especially in eastern Tibet, where they're a little more macho, those guys. And they want to waste some Chinese. And when they get to that point, they burn themselves instead, which is bad for the micro beings, and their microbiome doesn't like it in their belly when they swallow a bunch of gasoline and then light it internally. You know, goes right down there, burns up the microbiome. That's like a billion beings, burns in the stomach.
Worse than antibiotics.
What? What?
Worse than antibiotics.
It's really quite a bit worse. But they do. But that's heroic, though. In a way, it's a weird thing. It's very bad because it's being violent against themselves. But it's heroic in the sense of they don't take anybody with them. Mm-hmm. You follow me? And actually, it's a sign of when you're really oppressed by somebody. You can't kill me because I'll kill myself first. I'm free. I know it's scary. It's scary. It's very controversial within Buddhism too. People, even among the Tibetans, it's very controversial.
Socrates.
What?
Socrates,
yeah, that's right. He could have escaped. He could have escaped and gone to a coffee shop in Sparta or Corinth or the Peloponnesus. He could have gone. He said, "No, man, give me the hemlock latte. I'll have a hemlock latte." That's what Socrates did. So my point is that that's a Shantideva one.
Yeah.
Shantideva one is I will not kill out of hatred of killing an enemy. It's very interesting. Those verses and the Gita verses, that's also a very good comparison because he says, you know, when you kill the enemy, all you're doing is killing a corpse. And the enemy is going to get you from their next life, they're going to come back at you. So it's much better just give yourself away, and then you don't have an enemy anymore. You know, and so the level of overcoming hatred is so powerful. You know, for that reason. And I think that's it's very hard to find that in the Gita. But if you say that he drops it, he says fine, but then they're stuck in this stupid battle. It's so stupid anyway.
Yeah, and the book goes on, the Mahabharata goes on. The battle was a disaster.
Of course.
And then within 15 years, like both dynasties were crumbling.
Yeah.
Everybody, and so it's almost like it exposed that because what was being taught in the Gita was dialectic. Meaning talk,
Okay. Yeah, if you can approach it that way without being assassinated by the RSS.
Yeah.
I'm all for it.
Yeah. And then at the end of the book, people, psychopathic generals and emperors are taken, they're really taken apart as,
right.
And then, at the end of the book, so Krishna, in the Mahabharata, also he passes away because the dynasties just fall apart.
Yeah.
Everyone becomes a partier and an idiot.
At the end of the Mahabharata, the children of the victors are all killed.
Oh yeah.
So that then the whole thing of you have to defend the family, you're a warrior, turned out to be completely.
Yeah. And so basically, it's like the religious interpretations have proven to be a disaster. Not at the very end, but so Yudhishthira was Arjuna's big brother, and he was quite respected, and he was the last of the.
Did you say Yiddish-tira?
Yudhishthira. Now we know where that came from too.
True. It proves my point.
Oh, so after they won they basically won the battle.
Yes.
Although they didn't really win it, they thought they'd won.
It was
The five brothers.
Prajumna or somebody came and slaughtered all their children.
Yeah.
In a tent. They were all snoozing while they were drinking beer.
But they did an ashramedha sacrifice, a horse sacrifice.
Oh, wow.
Which is where this is an old thing, they used to do human sacrifices.
I know. The Vedas, I know that.
Yeah, and I was like, whoa.
I know.
Okay, but they'd sacrifice a horse, and they'd send the horse all over the area that was the kingdom.
Right, to show their mastery and dominance, yeah.
And then they had this whole ritual, and they also kinky things with the horse, and certain. I leave that up to your imagination. But anyway, it's terrible to sacrifice the horse.
It's very not nice.
And one of the teachings of in the Mahabharata is like, this is really stupid.
Like what?
They're stupid, and so all of the priests, they did a perfect sacrifice, and so everybody was happy. And then a weasel came out of the forest, which was made of half gold, and that's the whole 4 chapters is how the weasel turned half gold. But weasels are considered real slimy slime balls, representing probably the author of the whole book. And then he starts and everybody's freaking out because a weasel in the area of the sacrifice, because it's considered an unclean animal.
Oh, right.
And so it just, and the weasel starts laughing at them and saying, this is like the worst sacrifice I ever saw. It's a talking weasel. And so then they give a whole chapter to this talking weasel, who just explains that this is actually not a sacrifice. You're just a bunch of puffed up, people who think, royalty, like entitled assholes who are causing suffering. And then he tells the story on that same battle, the same field of Kurukshetra, how, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, there was a really kind Brahmin who kept feeding another friend. And he described this beautiful story of someone who actually gave to someone else.
Right. Well,
That's a true sacrifice. And then the weasel, they were about to do something to him, and he slithered off. And at the very end of the book, Yudhishthira, all of his brothers have died, and they've all gone to they've been tested by Indra, and finally Yudhishthira's, he's walking up in the Himalayas, and they say, oh, it's time for you to come to heaven. Okay, and so they
That's right.
pull up in a, flying chariot, and he says, "Come on in." And so Yudhishthira, but his whole time he's been accompanied by a dog.
I know, I love that.
This very cute dog.
Nina likes that very much.
Yeah, and then Yudhishthira, and he starts to get into the chariot, and they say, "Oh, but your dog can't come." And Yudhishthira, he finally gets it. He says, "I'm not going anywhere without my dog. This is my best friend."
Do they let the dog in after that?
Yeah, the dog manifests as who the dog actually is, which was the god Yama.
Yama, I see.
Yeah, and that was Yudhishthira's enlightenment. He finally
I see.
gave up, any sense of needing to go to heaven or to hell or anything.
Oh, so Yama was manifested as a dog, as you just did a dog. That's really exciting.
And then they got that,
Yes.
and so that was new, very end.
Well, I think
So it's
that
kind of a sweet-
Vyasa and Homer are doing a similar job in the sense of they're taking this oral epic that glorifies violence and warriors that were part of all these ancient tribal cultures. And then they put it together in an ornate poetic structure. And then they indulge people going through it, and that they read they get that heroic thing going to them, Maharata, this Maharata, that Maharata, that Mahabahu, and all this, the great armed one. It's like this definite, like superhero stuff.
Yeah.
But then they put it in a framework and they show the futility of the whole thing.
Yeah.
Total futility, like Agamemnon, what a moron. Sacrifices his daughter to get a fair win with the start off. Remember?
Yeah.
Kills his daughter, and then he gets killed by his wife when he gets back because he's such an ass, and then they wrecked Troy, which was like a party. It was like Paris compared to the grisly business back in the Attic Greece. With the lousy Retsina and too much garlic. The Persians of the Greeks ate too much garlic. So they didn't like going into the Senate, the Greek Senate, because they would debate with them, they would get elected. Phew. So anyway, never mind. But I think that's similar, yeah.
But another trouble with the Mahabharata
Yes,
is I take technically the longest book
yeah, it is
in the
really.
world. And a lot of it is, it's all written in verse,
Mm-hmm. I know I have to read it in intermediate Sanskrit.
the whole thing.
No, but many
yeah.
verses.
Yeah, it's like endless. It's like, 3 volumes like that,
I know.
and,
But it was,
but most people don't read it.
I was really good, but some of my colleagues, in Buddhist studies, they were so thrilled they were at other programs at other universities, they didn't have to read that. So they were sneering at me. But then they go and translate, sometimes some of the great Buddhist philosophers are called Maharata, and they would translate this as the Great Chariot. They didn't know it was a translation of a Bhagavad compound. And so Maharata means like a big wheel. It means they're not wheels themselves, they own a big wheel. They didn't know what a Bhagavad was. So it was a kind of good thing for learning about Indian culture.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, and the endless, it's, to me, Indian culture is just like vast. And it's like, as soon as I think I've got it, it's like,
It's amazing.
go to the next town,
But it is the great democracy on the planet, actually.
It is, it's the largest democracy.
So we would, India, did you know that India saved the American Revolution? Did you guys know that? The Gaddafi of the 18th century was this Tipu Sultan. He was the bad guy from the Brits, from the colonials. And he sent 3 treasure chests to the American rebels because he was a Francophile. And he was really against, big chests of jewels he sent to the Americans because he liked them throwing off the British yoke, because he wanted to throw off the British yoke. And but unfortunately none of them arrived. They were stolen by the captains of the ships. And then the British, when we had some victories and I think drove Cornwallis to Canada or something, the Americans did. Washington, but the American army was all in disarray, Valley Forge, and they were all freezing, and they, they did them. They all had gout and scurvy and whatever. They didn't know how to wipe their butts. They were really a pathetic bunch, and getting dysentery and things. And during that time, there was a vote in the British Parliament where some Lord so-and-so said to the people, well, we can reinforce Cornwallis, who's lurking up there in Canada, and send a few battalions and waste those uppity Boston, and Virginia, colonials. Or we can send those battalions to India to consolidate our hold over India and get the Tipu Sultan and Mysore and this and that. And gentlemen, which do you prefer? Do you want lumber and tobacco and fur? Or do you want jewels and silk and mangoes and spices? What do you want? Oh, they said, I think we really want India. We can get those Yankees there anytime. So that saved us. They were the French, and they were our allies, against the British. Nobody knows that. So we go way back with them. And now the global struggle is autocrats, dictators versus democracies. India and us, we're like it, and what's left of the European Union. Ta-da, ta-da.
This is just a chapter of
What's that?
Mahabharata.
What?
So the Mahabharata
Yes.
is the ongoing story.
Yes.
The story within the story.
Yes.
We are just minor stories.
Yes, we are.
Yeah. All Ganesha.
But
is
one
writing it
thing I
down.
can say,
Yeah.
the TV series in India on the
Oh, the
Mahabharata,
Mahabharata, yeah.
the choices they made the wrong interpretation. They didn't make the Ahimsa interpretation.
No.
And this is very connected to the uprising of the RSS and the destruction of the mosque in Ayodhya and the rise of Modi
Because
and
that
so
all
forth.
came after
And
the
Modi, in a way, is
Mahabharata
like the
TV
Trump.
series.
He's like the Trump of India,
Yeah.
except he's smarter than Trump, luckily.
Yeah.
No, he is.
Yeah.
I met him.
Oh, yeah,
I
yeah.
met him. He's quite smart. And also, I scolded him. The guy I met him with was very upset with me because I didn't pitch the proposal. The reason I was meeting him was to get his support in doing a translation thing there. And all I did was talk about karma. I did.
And how did he react?
This is your Indian science, because he's all proud of India.
But
This is your Indian science. You elected not just you are not just voted because you can Twitter. I said you were voted because in previous life you were Chakravarti Raja and you cared for your people and you took care of them. So you're having another shot. If you exploit them and oppress them now, forget about it. And I gave a long elaboration about how karma was like biological science. And he was the beneficiary of his past good deeds, and he better keep being good.
And how did he react?
And he was so happy, and he said, oh, I like that, he said. But he said it in Hindi, because he has this thing about talking Hindi, although he speaks English, but he will speak to it in Hindi, and there's a lady who interprets.
Oh.
And he said, I like that, he says. And when you make your translation center, and he did speak in English, he said, you shall have my support. He said, he did, but I gave him a 40-minute lecture about karma. I did, but I didn't memorize the Gita, so I couldn't use those verses. I should have. They're the Buddhist ones.
Yeah, you can pull him out.
What?
You can hit him with them. Yeah.
But he's going to be there for a while, He's also not completely owned by the RSS. His Geburtsdorf, his birth village, they had a big Buddhist monastery ruined there in Gujarat. And he showed me a book. He gave me a book about showing the ruins of the monastery. And as a little boy, he would go sit there in that monastery. And he liked it because I don't think he was a high caste person at all. Modi, he was not a Brahmin or something. He was some, Vaishya caste, I think.
Yeah.
Right? So he kind of liked the Buddhists. That's the big sin of the Buddhists in India, was they didn't like the caste system. And then the Buddha ordained anybody, if you went to the Buddha with your servant, and apparently whenever you met the Buddha, you just felt like dropping out and staying there, it's like coming to Menla or going to Boulder. It's like you don't feel like going back to the office. And so you go there, and some of those princes, Shakya princes, would arrive with their barber or their servant, and because they were princes, the barber would be going ahead to find the way, And the barber came first, and then the barber met the Buddha, and the minute you would meet the Buddha, apparently, you were like, oh, I want to be a monk. Well, I'm going to be a mendicant. Free food, no lice, no hair. And then Buddha had these magical beings that would shave your head instantly and change your clothes, like instant fashion, like whack. Just like, like the internet, something, Amazon. They deliver the orange robe right there. And your hair was gone, beard gone, cleaned right up. And then they'd be happy, and then they got ordained, that means 10 minutes before the prince. So then the prince had to defer to the barber or the servant right away. It was his senior in the new world, in the new community. And he was no longer superior to the barber, which is a lowly caste, barbers, right? So that made them annoyed with Buddha, That was another reason. That's why they don't mention that Krishna's Buddha. Really? I want to see those verses. I forgot that. He keeps saying, I'm a Buddha?
No, he keeps saying the Buddhas, the awakened ones, see me everywhere. And on the heart of all people.
Well, everyone who likes him is Buddha.
So anyone with discriminating awareness,
really,
intelligence is Buddha.
That's really cool.
An enlightened being is Buddha.
That's particularly cool because there's another thing about India that you probably all don't know because you know a bunch of Brahmins and you all think it's so great. But the word dasa, like Krishna Das, Bhagavan Das, Ram Das, dasa means a slave or a servant, But in the Vedas, the dasyu and dasa meant the indigenous inhabitants of India, the dark-skinned, it's a color bar, the dark-skinned Harappans, who probably are the Tamils and the Karnatakas and the Telugu people, the South Indian people, who are darker skinned in general. And the people in Harappa were considered by the chariot warriors who came in and conquered them bit by bit, and migrated occasionally. And one of Indra's names, the god of the Vedas, one of his names is Gramagataka, which means destroyer of citadels, shatterer of citadels. And there's some of the early Vedic mandalas, you invoke Indra, and then Indra drinks soma. And when he drinks that Amanita muscaria mushroom, he goes berserk and he goes and stamps on a few cities. And because those people were nomads think that people who live in cities are like ants. They don't think that's a human thing to do. Like Mongolians were like that. Because they live in the big sky. So they would come and trample on these people. So the Dasyu people. And the earliest word for caste was varna, which means color.
It's still the word for it.
So the fact that God becomes a black, it shows a huge, amazing maturity in the Indian civilization. And the fact that the enlightened people like the dark, thundercloud-colored Krishna, which means black, right? Thundercloud black. And they like thundercloud because thunder is going to bring the monsoon rain, and it's going to make them alive. So that's really, it's a multiracial couple. Like that movie that's made about those poor people in Virginia, right? Remember the guy who married a black woman and they were trying to burn them at the stake, and they're still doing that in Charlottesville right now, even now, today. I mean, look, Trump has them all up there, bunch of weirdos. They don't know black is beautiful. The Indians figured it out 2,000 years ago.
They did.
Krishna.
Yeah.
I love it.
That's what it means. Literally means black, but then they say it's like a monsoon cloud, which is like.
Well, it's Schaefer's blue-black ink.
Yeah. Yeah.
Isn't that fun?
And another name, Krishna in the Gita. Like Arjuna and Krishna keep calling each other all these fancy names.
Oh yes, of course.
Which no one bothers, because Krishna is Rishikesh. So he has like a hairdo that goes zing like that.
Yeah, wow.
And he's like.
It's a big afro.
Yeah. he has a big, in all these different things they call each other. Well, they make fun of each other, because they'll say, oh, basically they call each other mama boy. So
What?
Mama's boy, you are the son of so-and-so.
Oh, yeah, they always do that.
And so they're always like, there's so many jokes that I think.
I like to see more, as we go through more of the verses, I like to see more
See some
jokes. I like that. I like that. So anyway, then, of course, in Buddha, in order to do that, Buddha, in his time, he had to do this really shocking thing. You have to realize that in a patriarchal society, and you're a prince, the Arjuna-Krishna dialogue is a reflection on the Buddha's father dialogue, and the father's ministers, which are like the Brahmin psychiatrists, And for Buddha to walk away from father, wife, and son, and throne, and his duty as a warrior, which means commander-in-chief, the king. Remember, it was predicted to Buddha from the whole sage in his story. You all know Buddha's story, I'm sure. When he was a baby, it was predicted that if he stayed in the home life up into his 30s, he would conquer the world. He'd become a wheel-turning monarch, which means he conquers everything else, makes an empire, or an emperor. But if he didn't stay in the world, he would become a Buddha. And the holy man who said that, Asita was his name, to the father, wept when he saw the Buddha baby. And then the father said, oh, what's wrong? Is he going to die, my son, or something? And he says, no, he's going to be a Buddha, actually. You could try to keep him at home, but actually he'll be a Buddha. And the reason I'm weeping is because I'll be dead by the time he's a Buddha, because he was an aged sage. And I won't get to see him as a Buddha, because that's a really special thing in life. And that's why I'm crying. My own egotistical thing. The sage said to the king. So for the shock of leaving, at the time when he had a son was fairly newborn, and that's the time when the grandfather can retire and go to live in an ashram and take a break. And the son has to do the boring job of being the king and judging all the law cases and fighting the battles and doing all the stuff the king has to do. And the son then suddenly says, no, I'm going to go be Buddha, and I'm leaving, and I'm not going to have a family anymore, and you guys got to take care of it and deal with it. I'm going to take care of birth, death, suffering, sickness, old age. I'm going to take care of those things. And they said, well, you can't take care of them. The priests are supposed to take care of them. The gods are supposed to take care of them. Buddha said, God's doing a crappy job. I'm going to take care of it. That's what people's problems are. So that's a huge shock. That would be Arjuna getting the hell out of the chariot and saying goodbye. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to fight. I'm a mendicant. How about a free lunch? That was a shock, but that's how India, that opened the door. I call it the Swiss cheesification of the caste system of the Indian patriarchal society. And this is also why Buddha was reluctant. He refused twice. He was asked 3 times by his ex-wife and his ex-foster mother and many other women trailing behind them to be nuns, female mendicants. And he refused twice. And the reason he refused, because then people were interceding, how can you say no and all this? And he said, you mean women are somehow can't become enlightened, or they can't become saints, or whatever? He says, no, they can do it easier than men. They're not as stupid as men. But the point is, it will strain the tolerance of the patriarchs. So many of them will come. And this will shorten the life of the community, because the patriarchs will not allow this. That's the reason he gave. And sure enough, then finally the 3rd time they said, okay. And he tried to make it a little more, he tried to make it a little less comfy for them by adding a few precepts, like 100 more, 250 and 350. He gave extra precepts to them. And also they had to listen to the male monks, so they couldn't completely take over. So then stampede, the women leaving the patriarchal family, of course. They were not having a happy time. They were not having pride parades. No way. They were married off at puberty or before to some old goat someplace who had some wealth, 5 to 8 childbirths by the age of 20. And all the cooking, cleaning, washing, and having to embrace the creepy old weirdo. Buddha. I love Buddha. There's one of them wrote a poem. She said, I just had lunch under a tree. I only have one bowl. Someone else cooked it, gave it to me. I just wipe out the bowl, put it in my little sack. If this isn't nirvana, it's close enough. Thank you, Buddha. You saved me from 3 crooked things. My bent rice pounding pestle I used to have to husk the rice with. My bent over old scolding mother-in-law. And my hunchback husband. Thank you, Buddha. They have poems like that. They do. Anyway, never mind. So the Gita nicely pulls it together and has that little bit of thing left, And then they want him to man up, Arjuna, like stand up, man up. And then when he tell you about Jnana Yoga and Bhakti Yoga, which is harder. Okay, once you're brave enough to fight. I guess the fighting is happening anyway, whatever. I don't know. That's no excuse for that, but that's just the way it is. The way it was. Kali Yuga was there. By the way, the verses that talk about the fighting are extremely vivid, and they really are like superhero comics.
Oh, yeah.
The Mahabahu, Bhima, the one brother who's really the big, what is the Obelix? Asterix and Obelix, those comic books, the French one. Obelix is the one who comes back and carries 2 wild boars on his shoulder, right? He's a big, very strong guy, right? So that's Bhima, right?
Yeah.
So he picks up tree trunks and bashes them with a tree. They're really rough. It's like,
it's
what?
like these are Marvel comic books.
They really are.
They're
Yeah.
quite exciting.
So then Buddha quotes many things about his ahimsa. And he talks back to and he's even offered, he leaves his own kingdom as an ascetic, cuts off his hair, he's wearing rags. And then he walks through Magadha to Rajagriha, the capital of Magadha, neighboring very powerful kingdom. And the king hears about him because he's so magnificent as a prince. He's not yet ascetical and all skeletal, which he becomes after many years of meditating and eating with almost no food. And so that guy comes and offers him half his kingdom. At first he wasn't worried maybe he's coming to conquer his kingdom because he was famous already as a youth. He was 29 years old. And then he realizes he's not, and then he comes in and he says, well, you shouldn't, he also tells him, you shouldn't be an ascetic, you're a king, you should do this. And if you and I work together, we can conquer everybody, and I'll give you half my kingdom, he says. But he says, no, that's okay. I said, left my dad there, I'm not bothering you, and I'm going, And actually, one of the Vinayakas that say that king, Bimbisara, who meets him, who's king of Magadha, he's born on the same day as Buddha anyway. His birthday is the exact same day as Buddha's, years before. He's also the same age. Bimbisara. So it's the whole thing, it's like a group plant sort of thing. They have a vision of it like that. In the Vinaya. Hinayana people do. Like they all took rebirth in a certain way to enact this Lalita Vistara. Set up this archetypal play kind of thing. Okay, I think it's time for yogis and yoginis to sleep. Oh yeah, there's the special, this is like Jnana Yoga of the Gita, and it's, some of you haven't been here, we have a special sleep yoga. This is to help us cure ourselves of our nihilism, which we have as Americans, because we think that when we die, we're going to be nothing. We're told that by MIT, Harvard, reputable scientists and authorities that the future life is an old superstition and we don't need that anymore. And also Zen teachers teach that, unfortunately. And of course, I don't know if you realize that, but that is utterly insane. Because nothing is not waiting for us. Because then nothing is there. So there's no place to go. So nobody's going to ever get to be nothing. Not a single person. Just like when you go to sleep tonight, you know, we've worn you out with our dialectic, and you're tired, and you traveled, you flew all the way from everywhere, and so you're going to feel so nice when you fall asleep, like, but you're not going to stay asleep. You're going to dream, and then you're going to get up. So the reason is that you never entered nothing. So although your room is dark, and although you lose consciousness, and you're willing to be nothing in order to sleep, you could become nothing, right? If nothing was something you could become, you could. And I think subliminally, when we sleep, because we grow up in a culture that tells us it's realistic, and all that stuff about the soul, and you're going to be reborn somewhere, that's ridiculous. We know we don't have a soul. We just take some Prozac and then we quiet. Forget about it. We know that. Because that's what Richard Dawkins tells us, and Steven Pinker, and Daniel Dennett. But that's wrong, because they're insane, actually. Because they think they're going to be nothing. If you have a blind faith in nothing, you're insane. You could have a blind faith in Krishna, or in the burning bush. The bushes were already back there with Moses, the Bush family. They were burning right there where they were the petroleum. Burning. We're blowing off steam right there. Go get Pharaoh. Really? Jesse Jackson was trying to stay away from them and he failed. So, I know that's irrelevant. So, okay, when you fall asleep, you go into darkness, which is the threshold of what is called the clear light of the void, which is Krishna. Which is, it looks dark, but it isn't really. It's the infinite love. You realize that if the energy is infinite, if the deepest substance of the universe is infinite energy, it's utterly quiescent. Do you realize that? Because if it's infinite, everything's already done. There's nothing remaining to be done. Do you dig that? And furthermore, anything that erroneously that's formulated as a configuration of that infinite energy, which is everything, but anything that consciously thinks that it doesn't have enough, that it needs something, it can infinitely draw on that. And that's why your cells and your mind and body feel better when you wake up, even if you're waking up at 4 in the morning to go meet Mary. And doing so much stuff to you. You have that because you got energy from somewhere, and it didn't come from nothing. So the sleep yoga is, as you release yourself into the darkness, as you fall asleep, you congratulate yourself ahead of time in that you are going to be embraced, you're going to be in the lap of infinite, bed of infinite love. Love meaning energy that is a plenum of everything you could possibly ever need. Every single cell in your body, every piece of your microbiome, every subatomic wave, energy, particle, they don't even know what it is. There's no particle. Your subparticulate awareness has to be almost unconscious to be open to that energy. And therefore it will nourish your energy into feeling better, and you'll have a great day tomorrow at Menla, here at Menla. Okay, thank you very much. That's the sleep yoga. Don't think you're going back into the dark nothing that waits for us after death when you fall asleep. You're in the clear light of the void, okay? Prabhasvara, it's called. It's the same word as Brahma's heaven, actually. Prabhasvara. Abhasvara, Prabhasvara. Those are the same words they use. So that it's like that, the top of the form realm. So very similar like that. That's where all the Buddha verses are. They're all in that horizon.